Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special council meeting for Monday, December the 5th. Unfortunately, we cannot convene the meeting until we have a quorum of council. So if we could please just go to standby for a few minutes. Councillors, we are live. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We're live. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special council meeting for December 5th, 2016. I want to first declare that we're on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations, and the clerk tonight is Ms. Jane Armstrong. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Are there any late items, Ms. Armstrong?
Your Worship, staff is recommending this evening's agenda be amended as follows. Agenda item 8B, the quarterly single submission purchases report, replace page 1 of that report with the new page that's attached to the addendum. Agenda item 9E, section 72 and 73 of the Community Charter, delete 951 Halliburton Street, delete the delegation, and move the report to the end of the administration section. Agenda item 15, core services report and delegation, delete the delegate, Ms. June Ross. And council should also note that there is a typographical error in licensing and control of animals amendment bylaw. It's agenda item 7B. It should read bylaw number 4923.11.
Thank you. Any other late items? Councillor Bestwick.
I'd like to add a late delegation to item 9A, Mr. Miles Parsons.
You got that? There was also another late request for delegation, Ms. Bouvet.
No, I don't have that unless a council member would like to bring that request forward.
Okay. Councillor Yoakum.
Yeah, I have no problem bringing Audrey's request forward.
Thank you. Is she present tonight? Okay, we'll see when we get to it. I've also got a notice to motion with respect to the locating of marijuana dispensaries in proximity to children at areas where children congregate. Thank you. Any other? Motion to adopt the amenda as agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Administration. Appointment of bylaw enforcement officer. And that is purpose is to obtain council approval to appoint Patrick McIntosh as a bylaw enforcement officer. Is there someone prepared to move the motion? Moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Brennan. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is Licensing and Control of Animals Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 4923.11. The purpose is to amend the Licensing and Control of Animals Bylaw 1995, number 4923, to allow for collection of outstanding dog licenses which remain unpaid for the licensing year. Is there anyone prepared to move the staff recommendation or any other recommendation? Moving the recommendation, Councillor Brennan. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Is there discussion? Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. We've had some inquiry as it relates to this report. I think there was an item that brought forward from the City of Burlington that has introduced lifetime licenses, which would avoid the annual license fees, which seems to make some sense when you read their report. That's just a comment. Question to staff would be, how many years are we intending to go? Number one, how many years do we intend to go back? Number two, is this a complaint-driven? So if somebody has a Maltese toy poodle in their home that never goes outside, for the most part, and they had a license in 2002, they haven't renewed it for 14 years, and somebody knows that they have a toy poodle in their house, are we going to go and charge them for 14 years of licenses?
Currently, we would not do that if council decides to adopt this suggestion or this recommendation. It would start for the 2017 year. In other words, in 2018, if there were outstanding license fees from 2017, anything before 2017, we would be writing off.
Thank you. Just to follow up, how do we, I'm assuming that most people with pets don't have death certificates. How much time do we intend to invest on determining whether or not a person's pet has a license, doesn't have a license, how in 17 and 18, if in fact that pet may have passed or not passed, like how do we intend to undertake this task?
Your Honor, what we've historically done is it's a phone call for those people who are on a prior year's list that have bought licenses for their dog. If they haven't bought a license for that current year, our animal control contractor will endeavor to make a phone call to determine whether or not the dog is still within the jurisdiction of Nanaimo or whether the dog has passed away, or if there is any other circumstance where we wouldn't sell a license to that person. You know, how much time we would devote to it would be dependent totally on the manpower of our contractor and what else they're doing. We don't set out any certain block of time, or we don't set out man hours to do that. It's just part of the regular work.
Thank you. Follow up. So what do we think the financial implications of this bylaw? So the return on our investment, if you will, the time that would be involved. So we must have an understanding that there's a certain amount of animals that haven't been relicensed that would generate a certain amount of revenue. So that's the first half of that question. The second half, do we adopt the same type of licensing for business licenses that we know people have been operating for years and years without a business license, which I assume is far more dollars than a dog license?
Council, I wonder if we can stick with what's at hand here. This is about dog licensing, not business licensing.
I couldn't agree with you more. It is about dog licensing, and I'm asking the
Dog
question.
licensing, that would be great.
So my question is if this is a consistent applied practice that we may pursue then business licenses with the same vigor as dog licenses, when business licenses would probably be easier. We don't have to phone and find out if their dog is dead or alive or if their business is dead or alive. We would know pretty easily. So I think it is relative. I think it is consistent with our application in the city. And so I don't think it's off the mark to ask.
Councillor, we're here to talk about licensing and control of animals amendment bylaw 2016.
Couldn't agree with you more.
23.11.
Couldn't agree with you more.
So if we can stick to that, that would be appreciated.
My point is that so there's two questions that I asked you. If you could please provide the answers to the two questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think to start with, it's difficult to compare the dog licensing to business licensing simply because if we have an active business in the community, one of the things that's done at the end of the year is send out reminders to all current license holders that the new license fees are up, and we get a large portion of those businesses comply and renew their license. If they don't, there's active contact by licensing staff to determine A, has the business discontinued, and if not, reminding them to pay for their licenses. So a large percentage of those we do get compliance. However, if you got to the end of the year and we'd been working with a business owner and they still had not paid their license fees, any subsequent license fee would first have to pay off the previous year had that fee not been paid. But we're very much more aware of course, the existing licenses in town and the current status of that business.
Councillor Kipp.
I cannot support any changes to this bylaw on the floor at the present time. I've got a couple of situations that I'd like to ask a staff question. My old dog died in November, and I went down in January when I got my letter and said, my dog died. And I took a license out for my new dog. A little while later, I thought it was a letter, but maybe it had been a phone call asking why I hadn't licensed my new dog. And I had been to our counter and talked to the staff. She played with the keyboards, but I still got my notice. So that, to me, is a lack of communication internally of what's going on. I have a further one. When what I call my next-door neighbor daughter, when her dog Lucy was killed by the dog next door, a German Shepherd attacked the little dog. So the staff process was quite interesting. They had phoned in before when the dog had previously attacked, and they came out and talked to the owner. And then the second time the dog attacked, it killed Lucy. And it was quite a traumatic event because it killed right in front of their 5-year-old, right in front of her, in their front porch. So what staff did was, I guess, look up if Lucy had a license. Lucy didn't have a license for that year. She's an internal dog carried in a purse and was out in the front yard about 4 feet from their step when she was killed. And only a couple days later, the bylaw representative came by the house, walked by the cross of the dog, and knocked on the door and asked why the license wasn't paid for Lucy. He had to step around the dead dog's cross right there. So I can't support how this is being enforced, the application of process. I think it's inconsistent. It does have how we handle bylaw and licensing is all the same in the city, and I challenge you on that one if you think it's in effect. So can staff tell me how consistent, how are the internal processes improved by you doing this? And you haven't improved the internal processes, and you're going out and doing more processes all the time. And I'm not fussy with how the service is right now currently, so that's why I can't support it. So how come it took 3 months and a letter, and that's costly, when I've gone in and it came out, I went in January, and it came out in February, the phone call or whatever, so the system's wrong. So how can you improve the system with this new bylaw? And what about the public service where a guy walks past a cross on the lawn? Like, what's he focused on? The name Lucy, the dog cross and everything right there, and he walks up, knocks on the door, and looking for the last year's license fee. So explain to me how that is a public service for our people. Question through the staff?
Your Worship, I won't comment on the question Councillor Kipp's asking. Is it's a contracted service. It's not city staff. It's not bylaw staff. It's our animal control contractor. I was aware of the situation. Councillor Kipp did bring this up, I believe, at an earlier meeting.
And excuse me, I've never got an answer, and I think it's our service that we pay a contractor for. We must have control. We can't just say, I can't answer for the contractor. Who's in charge of that contractor? They should be able to answer my questions at this table, because we're talking about more money, chasing people. It's not public service to me. I mean, never mind, don't even answer my questions. I rarely get answers to them anyhow. I guess because I throw tantrums.
Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could take the specific issue that Councillor Kip is bringing up offline, would have the COO follow up and provide an answer as quickly as possible on that issue, so you can concentrate on what we're asking you to consider for us, and we'll take the specific issue offline. Thank you.
Thank you. That suffice?
No, it's not satisfactory, actually. I've asked the question months ago.
Thank you.
It's not
Councillor Fuller.
satisfactory.
So for business licenses, reminders are sent out when they're to renew their business license. Are reminders sent out to dog owners to renew licenses?
I don't know if reminders are sent out. It's sent out through the finance department and or the animal contractor. I know that if the owner of the dog has not renewed a license, then it precipitates a phone call.
Mm-hmm. So there's a sort of a reminder that by phone call. So it is a lot like business licenses. I see the similarities there. So the way this is phrased is, this will allow for collection of outstanding license fees from previous years. So 2005, someone had a license for their dog. They never got one since. Are we going to be looking back that far to try and recover money for those years that haven't been paid? And if we do that for dogs, why wouldn't we do it for businesses?
Not be going back. If council decides to adopt this, it would start with the 2017 license year. In 2018, we would be able to go back and just to 2017.
Okay, so in 2020 would just be able to go back to 2017?
That's
or just
correct.
2019?
Everything up until the end of this year would be written off.
But in the future, it wouldn't be. So I'm hoping that we will actually do something like that for business licenses, because I think we could recover a heck of a lot more money from business licenses that don't get paid in businesses operating without a license. Thanks.
Mr. Mema.
Through you, Your Worship, the feedback that we got to this item relating to business license, we had an internal discussion, and I got an email later this evening that confirmed that we are looking at the business license instrument as well to make it a little bit more, I think, in the same lines. But that's something that the lawyers are taking a look at. So if that would help council to focus on what's in front of them. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, and that is with respect to the report. It says that this amendment will allow for collection of outstanding license fees from previous years. I get that. But it also says a balance of approximately $97,000 is outstanding and will have to be written off. Well, if I read this report correctly, we had no right to charge the $97,000 in the first place. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's what precipitated this report coming to council.
So the $97,000 is floating around out there. Is that just for this last year, or is it for a number of years?
That would go back over the last 10 or 12 or 15 years. This is historic. Money's.
Okay, so if I could, I know that around our house, we were just talking about the other day, it seems like just yesterday we put the Christmas tree away, and at the blink of an eye, we got to bring it back out again. So I'm trying to understand the whole process. When you apply for a dog license, you're issued a dog license, and then as the 1 year leads into another, the next thing you know, you've got 5 or 6 years of unpaid licenses, and nobody's chasing you for it.
You would have
Unless there's an
received
annual renewal.
You would have received a phone call. You would have received probably a door hanger from our animal control contractors as reminders.
Do they go? So the door hanger would be for because there was a complaint that there was a dog there.
Not necessarily. They would. Once you buy a license for your dog, you're in our computer system, and if you have not renewed your license, then you would be put on a list, and depending on the workload, they would attempt to contact you either by phone, or if they're in the area, they would make a personal attendance knock on the door, and if you're not home, leave a door hanger. Most people, of course, are at work during the day, so they'll leave a reminder as a door hanger.
Councillor Brennan.
Just for information, there are written notices sent out every year, I think January, February, to remind me anyway, and it's not personal, it's a form that I have to get my license renewed for my dog. So I believe that there is a written notice sent to every registered dog owner saying it's time for you to pay this year's license.
That's where I was confused.
Yes, that's what I thought. Yep.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I have no problem with this amendment. To me, it's just an attempt from this point on to do a better job of recovering revenue which is owed to the city. And whether we choose to do that with business licenses at some point in the future would be another good discussion, but I don't see any problem with doing this for the dog licensing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I actually don't have a problem with the amendment. I would like to see something, maybe a lifetime for a dog or something like that, or even a 2-year, so you're not doing this every year. So, but I can support this, and I'm hoping that staff can go back and have a look at some of the suggestions that we said and come back with another amendment. But at this point, it seems to make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
I just hope that the people that are going to support this, and I'm going to support this, are also going to support when we do this for other things that require licensing, and not support those simply because.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded?
That's correct. The
you.
motion that council received the report.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Just the last question for me. If it's a midstream, so if it's 6 months into the year, are these licenses prorated?
I believe there is a prorating system in place after you get a discount if you pay before, I believe, February 28th. And if you register a new dog or you move to town afterwards, but if you're if you have a current license and you don't get a discount if you renew your license later in the year, say September, October. But if it's registering a new dog later in the year, I believe there is a discount. I can certainly check and get back to you.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? For receiving the report? Okay. That's correct. So call the vote again. All those in favor of receiving the report? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Thank you. Motion carries. So now we have 3 motions with respect to the bylaw. Councillor Thorpe, are you ready to read those out?
I'll move that Licensing and Control of Animals Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 4923.11, to provide for the collection of outstanding license fees, pass first reading.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brennan, thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion opposed. Councillor Kipp and Councillor Bestwick opposed. Motion carries. Next one.
I'll move that Licensing and Control of Animals, Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 4923.11, pass second reading.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Brennan, thank you. Discussion? Councillor Fuller.
I'm reading the bylaw, and then I'm looking at the report we just received, which talks about amending the bylaw. But nowhere in the bylaw does it talk about the amendment. All it's talking about is 2.1, deleting Schedule A in its entirety, substituting, blah, blah, blah. Each license fee shall be payable for licensing year in which the license shall be applied for regardless of the date within that year. So nowhere in this what we're approving, does it talk about the retroactive going after dog licenses?
Very good point. Staff? If I recall, that was the purpose of us reviewing this tonight.
It appears that perhaps we did not include the Schedule A, the amendment that we wanted to put into this report. I apologize, Your Worship.
So I would suggest that a motion to table till our next meeting would probably be in order. Motion to table, Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Kept proposed. Thank you. Motion carries. See you at our next meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. So the next one is property maintenance bylaw number 19, bylaw 1990, number 3704. And it's to obtain council authorization to enforce City of Nanaimo property maintenance bylaw 1990, number 3704. And it's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to property maintenance for the properties listed below. The first one is 179 Alberta Road. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to 179 Alberta Road? For the second time, anyone wishing to speak to 179 Alberta Road? And for the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak to 179 Alberta Road? Thank you. The next one is 750 Parkview Drive. Anyone wishing to speak to 750 Parkview Drive? For the second time, 750 Parkview Drive. Anyone wishing to speak to that? And for the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak to 750 Parkview Drive? Seeing none, there's a staff recommendation on page 14. Can we have a mover for this motion, please?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hong, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor, Mr. Mema, are you on? Okay, thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. I've been thinking about these, this regular agenda item for a little bit here and thinking about what these individual homeowners are going through. We don't know their story. We don't know the situation. Nevertheless, some stuff has to happen. I get that. But the point I want to make is this process how we go about this sort of shaming process. Sure, it might be in the pattern or the pathway how it's been done. I'm sure there must be a more of a less intrusive way this can be handled without this. So I was just wondering, like, there could be binders for the councillors that want to look at this. There could be binders. We have access. It can be to this. I just don't see the value on this in a public forum of this sort of this shame. I look at these yards, and I totally respect the neighbors and the bylaws that has to happen, but not saying we don't have to ignore the bylaws at all. I don't want to be a mixed message here, but there has to be a better way to process this, in my view. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Yoakum. We used to have a binder or book, I guess, just stapled together with pictures in the councillors' room that councillors could look at and prepare themselves for the meeting for making that decision. I agree. This is it only just started last term, and I can't remember what the reasoning was. But I think what Councillor Yoakum says makes sense. I don't think we need to. I think that the result of this is shaming. I don't think it was ever the intention. I think the intention probably was to show what council was willing to call an unsightly premise or property maintenance issue. So, and after seeing it in, whatever, after seeing how it works, I think it does shame people, and we don't need to do that. I think what we need to do is ensure that it gets cleaned up, and if we can do that without having to have the picture up for all and sundry to see and make judgments about the people that live in the home, then maybe we'd be better off not doing that. However, I do recognize that that would be the subject of a different motion, but I do support what Councillor Yoakum says.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Yoakum and Councillor Brennan, and I believe the book is still in the council room. At least it was when the room was in the other area, because I recall seeing it sitting on the table there. So it would be something fairly simple to do when you go and pick up your agendas and that. Just quickly peruse the book for the items that would be on the next agenda. Because, I don't think people need to see and possibly make fun of people that are having problems removing stuff from their yards. So if there is a way to do it, let's do it.
Your Worship, with these unsightly files, these are operational files that bylaw works on through bylaws that yourself and council has approved. It could be council's consideration that we don't bring these to council at all, that we, as a division, we enforce your bylaws for you without actually coming to council with unsightly.
Okay. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I actually do appreciate the updated pictures, because I remember the binders never had the picture like today's picture. So it does help when we ask. I think it all started like, well, what does it look like now? And we saw pictures that were 4 months old, and we didn't see any current ones. So it's nice that we get to see the current pictures, but maybe if we actually just got to put on our iPads, that would be better under our PDF expert, that we can just go into like our other categories, that we can see these instead of showing them on TV. Because I do like to see the picture that was taken at 10:41 this morning. So when we actually debate this, we can see what the condition of the property is as it currently stands. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if I could have Ms. Armstrong, if I could get some help here. These pictures are evidence of something we're going to have to determine or make a decision on tonight. We're required to have an open meeting of council. If we have these in a binder, or we provide these pictures via email amongst council, for example, or have a folder someplace we can look at them, are we fulfilling our requirements under the community charter to have all of the evidence in front of the governors, so to speak, in an open forum? Because otherwise we'd just be looking at addresses.
Your Worship, can I take that under consideration, and we'll consult with legal counsel and see what our obligations are under this section of the charter?
Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. I was going to suggest that we deal with these two items that are on our agenda tonight, these two properties. And then if we would like to entertain a different procedure or manner in which we conduct our property maintenance bylaw, then we submit with staff a notice of motion intended to deal with how we deal with these property maintenance bylaw issues in the future. So deal with what we have today, submit a notice of motion. If somebody wants to do that at the next meeting with the support of staff, so that we can deal with how we conduct our business in these instances moving forward. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kipp.
Well, the whole purpose of this is the public can come and appeal to council. That's the idea of this coming to council. Staff has the ability to do a bylaw. They have that ability to enforce now. And we look for consistent enforcement of our bylaws. If there's a parking ticket to be issued, it should be issued. If the guy's a judge, he's sitting in front of the courthouse, he still gets a ticket, even though he's an ex-friend of the cop who's writing the ticket, or whatever happens in some cities. So this gives the public the ability to come and address council, as you attain to, and give them the ability to address the governors and say, I don't believe this. I'm fixing it, I'm trying to do something, I'm mentally ill or whatever, and staff puts this together as their case against this. And what I don't think happens is that the public doesn't really know their process that well, I don't think. They may get a form letter, they may get told. I've never heard someone come here and say, oh, staff told me I should come here and I should bring my pictures and do that. So it's not a public service at this point. It's our bylaw coming to try and hammer a bylaw on a piece of property. And I use the word hammer because it's a big hammer sometimes when you come in and take stuff off a guy's property and it costs him $30,000 on his taxes. Right? So for me, the whole process of our bylaw, and if you want to talk about animal control just before that, and you want to talk about business licensing, is a pick and choose. And I look for more consistency. And so for me, like when you look at that house, it looks okay. But remember the one we had the man in front of us that talked about the tarp in front of his building. So I think these are, I'm not certain why they continue to come through like this and why it's a fight like it is. We've got our own properties that are messy and dirty, and we don't live to all the rules ourselves, but we expect others to, or we adjust them. And it's painful for me when we adjust rules to suit certain things. So, thank you.
Thank you. So, it's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Thank you. Motion passes. Next item number 8A, quarterly direct award purchases. And the purpose is to comply with council's purchasing power.
Excuse me, Your Worship, we had amended the agenda to deal with agenda item 9E at this point, which is sections 72 and 73 of the Community Charter. That's on page 69 of the council agenda.
9E.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's section 72 and 73 of the Community Charter. Its purpose is to obtain council authorization to enforce the provisions of the Community Charter regarding the properties at 951 Alberton.
Your Worship, we deleted 951 Halliburton Street, so it's just
Okay.
Boxwood now.
2120 Boxwood.
And the delegate has also been deleted.
Okay. So the purpose is to obtain council authorization to enforce the provisions of Community Charter regarding the property at 2120 Boxwood Road. So moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brennan, thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We go back to 8A or 8B. 8A?
I think it's fine just to call it 8A this evening. This is
Okay.
the quarterly direct award purchases.
Right. Thank you. The purpose is to comply with Council's purchasing power delegation bylaw 2013, number 7175, by reporting direct award purchases during the 3-month period from 2016 July 1 to 2016 September 30th. Can we have a motion to receive the report, please? Moved by Councillor Bestwick. And is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Oh, Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Just quickly, I know we're approving the reports, and the work's being done and happening. I'm sort of confusing myself here. Yeah, all this work's been done. We're approving it after, just to say it's been done to complete. Is that the purpose of this?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now on to your green sheets for 8B, correct? Quarterly single submission purchases. 8B has been replaced by the green sheets.
That's correct.
Thank you. Purpose is to comply with Council's purchasing power delegation bylaw 2013 number 7175 by reporting single tender submissions during the 3-month period from July 1st, 2016 to September 30th, 2016. Is there a mover? Councillor Brennan and Councillor Hong. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. 2016 to 2020 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw. To amend the 2016 to 2020 financial plan for changes that have occurred since the bylaw was last amended on 2016, September 19th. And there's a staff recommendation on page 20. Do we have a mover and a seconder? So moved. Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Beswick. Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just want to bring one item to Council's attention on page 20. The items that we've outlined as being amended, most of them you have seen in reports before except for one, which has to do with the ice center chiller replacement. That report was intended to show up at the November 28th, and it didn't show up. But we had written this report. However, we would like to proceed with the amendment, and we would speak to the amendment if Council so wishes. Thank you.
So you want to continue to include it in this report?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Can we have, so it's been moved and seconded, so you want to amend that?
No, we are simply flagging that
Great, thank
to
you.
say if Council needs additional information, we'll provide it.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question on this, and that is the pedestrian crosswalk warning flashers. Is that a normal number at $15,000? A normal installation cost? I know this is beyond the scope, but that's what they're costing now.
That's correct.
I'm seeing lots of nods. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, any other discussions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So the next item is the bylaw, and that is, we need someone to, Councillor Thorpe, to move the bylaws, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move that Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7222.03, to amend the 2016 to 2020 financial plan pass first reading.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And I'll move that Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7222.03, pass second reading.
And seconded by Councillor Pratt. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And I'll move that Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7222.03, pass third reading.
And seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. See no discussion, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. User rate increase bylaws. And the purpose is to provide a background on the bylaws to amend water, sewer, and garbage rates for 2017. There's a staff recommendation on page 25. We can get that moved and seconded to bring it on the table. Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Thorpe, still up?
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Question to staff on page 26, Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 7128.07. The 2017 rates, water, sewer, garbage, a $2 increase for garbage. Does this take into account our new, should we proceed in 2017 with our new collection service fees?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Beswick, no. This does not include the new rates should Council proceed with the new recycling. This is service as it stands today. If this were to proceed in the new year with the recycling, if the rates were to change, we'll be coming back for an amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Opposed? show Councillor Kipp was opposed. The motion is starting on the next page. Councillor Thorpe.
I'm sorry, I thought we were at the
Bylaws.
bylaws. Yes, thank you. So I'll move that Sewer Regulation and Charge Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 2496.29, to increase sewer fees in 2017, pass first reading.
Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries.
And I'll move that Sewer Regulation and Charge Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 2496.29, pass second reading.
And seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries.
And I'll move that Sewer Regulation and Charge Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 2496.29, pass third reading.
And a seconder? Councillor Hong, thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Thank you. Motion carries.
I'll move that Waterworks Rate and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7004.12, to increase water rates in 2017, pass first reading.
And seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries.
I'll move that Waterworks Rate and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7004.12, pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries.
And I'll move that Waterworks Rate and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7004.12, pass third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries.
I'd like to move that Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7128.07, to increase garbage and recycling rates in 2017, pass first reading.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries.
I'll move that Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7028.07, pass second reading.
Councillor, I note that it's 7128. I thought I heard you say 7028.
I'm sorry, I'll read that again. That Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7128.07, pass second reading.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Pratt. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Kipp opposed.
And I'll move that Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7128.07, pass third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries. Well, next one, bulk water rates for Southwest Extension. And the purpose is to provide background on the bylaw to amend water rates for Southwest Extension for 2017. There's a staff recommendation on page 37. Can we have a mover and a seconder to get on the floor? Moved by Councillor Hong, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries. 3 bylaws.
I'll move that. Thank you. I'll move that Southwest Bulk Water Rate Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7099.05, to increase the water rates for Southwest Extension for 2017, pass first reading.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And I'll move that Southwest Bulk Water Rate Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7099.05, pass second reading.
And there's our seconder. Thank you. Councillor Pratt is seconding. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries.
And I move that Southwest Bulk Water Rate Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 7099.05, pass third reading.
And And seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Moved and seconded. See no discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, 9A, British Columbia Intercollegiate Hockey League. And the purpose is to support the bid to host a British Columbia Intercollegiate Hockey League team at Vancouver Island University, utilizing the Nanaimo Ice Centre as the home rink. There's a staff recommendation on page 40. Could we have a mover and a seconder to get it on the table, please?
Excuse me, Your Worship, there was an amendment to the bylaw to include a delegate at this point.
Oh, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Doug Johnson, 5604 Hickelbrand Road, and I'm representing or speaking with three of the directors of the newly created Vancouver Island University Hockey Inc. And they are working with the VIU Mariners hockey program. And before we ask for your support, I thought we should maybe let you know what we've accomplished in a very short period of time. This really got off the ground probably in late October, early November. Once again, like a lot of things, they started in the old-timers dressing room, and we went from there. Obviously, having gone through this exercise before in other programs, one of the first things we've got to do is we had to come up with some dough. So the first thing I'm happy to tell you today is that 6 fellows, which I'll call the original 6, Tim Struch, Alex Dugan, George Harabowicz, Al Dreger, David Coupland, and myself have collectively donated $30,000, okay? So this isn't maybe money, this is money that's in the bank. As a result of us getting that money in by last Tuesday, Day of Giving, that accomplished a couple of things. The VIU Foundation has given us matching funds of $10,000. They've also committed $5,000 towards the cost of uniforms. So that brings us up actually relatively quickly. Concurrent with us raising this money, we've got a campaign that's gone out to the 800 men in town that play old-timers hockey and men's casual league. We also have an application into the Calgary Foundation to the Daryl K. Siemens Canadian Hockey Fund. This is through the efforts of working with the Nanaimo Community Foundation. They were the ones that gave us a tip, and the VIU Foundation staff, in about 4 days' time, put together this application for a further $10,000. So I guess my story today is that we're not coming to today just looking for your support. And in fairness to Richard here, we're sort of catching him at a little bit at the last moment, and we recognize this is a late delegation. But what we will be asking for is consideration. We will go through the due process of asking for ice time for the first 2 seasons without any charge for ice rental. Now, Richard and I go back a ways, and he says, well, that's actually not quite the way it's done. I'm showing my age a little bit, but in 1997, I did come before the council at the time, and I requested ice time without charge for the Royal Bank Cup. And I know we got worked over pretty good, but they agreed, and I was most pleased after the Royal Bank Cup was accomplished to give a check to the City Council for $100,000, so I'm not promising that we're going to give you $100,000 back if you give us free ice time, but I think we're going to give you something that's quite a bit more exciting. So in any case, we will be going through the process of applying for tangible assistance, which has a multiplier effect when we go to other people and ask for funding.
Thank you. Can we get free parking at the university?
Pardon me?
Boy, do they know how to charge up there. So at this particular point, it's you're not looking for anything other than just moral support.
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have an idea of a value of what they're going to be looking for at some point in the future if that were to go forward? I mean, how many games a season would they pay? would the ice rental be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Do we have got no value on that at this point?
The estimates that we've been given is that's worth about $7,000 per season.
Great. Thank you very much. It was for the purpose of the folks at home. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions for you. Thank you very much.
Not maple leaf colors, are they? Not maple leaf colors?
No, they'll be here.
Councillor Yocum for the delegation.
Just a comment. It would be, in principle, at this point, I definitely support this and definitely like to explore the request for the simple fact of looking at your schedule there. It's bringing those teams and families and people to in VIU League would have sometimes mature students and people wanting to travel and come to the city of Nanaimo. So for 7,000 and change, it's pretty good advertising for the city. So I look forward to hopefully having more conversation, be a support we can for your team, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Staff recommendation that council support the bid to create an intercollegiate VIU hockey team in the city of Nanaimo. We have a mover for that motion, please. Councillor Yocum, a seconder. Councillor Fuller, thank you. Discussion? Seeing none. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've read the report, and I will support the motion. It sounds exciting to me, but I do have a couple of concerns that I hope will be taken into account. One of them is the impact, which I note in the report, on youth scheduling and old-timers hockey being forced to either move or, in fact, cancel a number of games, and I would be very sorry to see that have to happen. And my second comment, at this point, although I certainly support a VIU Mariners hockey team, when I hear about us being asked to fund it for the first 2 years possibly, my question would be, where is VIU in helping fund this? So I don't know if those questions bear answering now, but I'd like them taken into account as we move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. See no other questions. It's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, number 9B, 2016 project budget changes. And the purpose is to provide council with an update on budget changes for 2 projects and the addition of 2 new road rehabilitation projects. The floor is all yours.
Just wondering, are there any questions from council?
Well, when I read that, I suspected there was going to be some sort of a presentation.
No, there's no presentation. These are projects that some of these projects are projects that have been completed and they've been over budget, but the funding for them has come from other projects that have been under budget. So it's really just a movement of money from one project to the other to complete them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kipp.
Yes, I'd like to know if staff or if council would, I'd like a motion to review what happened with the soils at the, I guess it's what's the project called? The Cliff Street project. I'd like a report on how that was handled through provincial hazardous material regulations. And what I'm concerned about, and our Parks and Recreation person isn't here, it's my understanding you cannot move hazardous material into a parkland, and we've done that. It's my understanding we weren't on the registry for this project as a hazardous material site. And I've asked that question, and I was told before yes, and now since I've been told no. And I have gone out and dug up some information on some of the processes that have to happen. So I want a report on this to ensure that all provincial standards were met. And whether I need a motion at this table or I just need a report from staff on it. Because I'm not pleased with what I've understood to happen.
So that would be absolutely appropriate to
after this motion.
There's no motion.
Okay, so, if somebody wants to move this motion, I'll make a subsequent motion after it.
Okay, to receive the report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bestwick next.
Thank you. Earlier in the budget, it was the quarterly, whereby $93,000 or $100,000 just south of was to repave the curling rink. parking lot? Was it in relation to, or in any reason because of the additional $357,000 for the soils that were placed on those in and around that area at the curling rink?
Through your worship to Councillor Baswick, my understanding is that the curling rink was already budgeted and planned to be repaved, so it was an opportunity to coordinate those two pieces and have that work done before the paving, so that would leave the site sort of renewed and pristine once the work was completed.
Thank you. Just to follow up, so we knew that the soils from the Cliff Street project were going to be taken to the curling club when we approved the paving of the curling rink site?
My understanding is that the paving was planned for the curling club. I'm not sure exactly when that plan was in place, but it was certainly prior to the development of that idea of having a containment cell there. And then once we knew that there was going to be a contaminated sites containment cell there, just a temporary situation, we coordinated that work so it could result in sort of the best outcome.
Thank you. Just my last question. The original request for proposal for the Cliff Street project, as it related to soils to be relocated to a licensed site, was it removed from the original RFP?
So with contaminated soils, depending on the level of contamination and what it is, there's certain permitted uses for that soil. In the case of Cliff Street, we had an environmental engineer that specializes in contaminated sites review the contamination and had discussions with the ministry. They developed a plan that included using the curling rink or the curling site as a temporary containment cell and materials handling site. So what that allowed us to actually do was to take the material off of Cliff Street, test the levels of contamination, what they were, where they were, and as we went along, those levels changed and the types of contamination changed. And so what this materials handling site enabled us to do was to separate out the materials that we were allowed to reuse from the materials that were not allowed to reuse. So what we ended up doing is we actually ended up saving the city quite a bit of money by reusing a lot of the material where it was appropriate to do so. A lot of the material still had to go to sites, North Island and in Duncan, but we were able to reuse quite a bit of it on the site as trench backfill.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, no further questions. Can we have a motion to receive the report, please? Moved by Councillor Bestwick. Is there a seconder? Councillor Thorpe, thank you. No further discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor, are you opposed, Councillor Kipp, to receiving the report?
Yeah.
Okay. Show Councillor Kipp is opposed. Motion carries.
I'd like to make
you
a
have
motion.
a subsequent motion?
Yes, I'd like staff to report on the Cliff Street. I've just made myself a couple notes here. A relocation Schedule 7 standard, if it's agreed to that. Whether 106 Street was on the registry to receive. Whether 106 Wall Street was on the registry to receive. Was there an SRA, or an approved site to take to? So which was it? Was there a site recovery assessment? Or was it to approve site? Is there a ministry letter of all clear? Ministry letter of all clear? And was the BioCell MOE 15 standard met? One of my concerns was that it was paved after, which can cap hazardous material. But because of the leaf strip from the top of Bank, I think we've even encroached into the leaf strip from top of Bank where we put the pavement, and that BioCell was on the gravel. So, and I don't believe the BioCell was created. So, relocation Schedule 7, was it met? Was the site a receiving registered site? Was there an SRA or an approved off-site? And was the minister letter all clear received? And was a BioCell MOE 15 lived to? This is a $300,000 extra bill, I think, that I see in here. And a lot of times we're complaining over a few $100,000, and it's disappointing. That's a 10% increase on that, and I'm not happy with it. Dirty soil was moved into parkland.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next one, development permit DP 975 at 415 Wakesaya Avenue. There's a staff recommendation on page 46. Is there? Moved by Councillor Brennan and a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Fuller.
Parking. This one really concerns me with parking. We're looking at reducing required parking from 56 parking spaces to 9 for the residential and from 20 to 15 for the commercial. And to me, that's just, I can't figure out how you would even look at doing something this drastic. Parking up in that area is starting to get as bad as the hospital area, and you know, if there's not going to be enough parking for people in the housing that might have cars, they're going to park on the street as well. And we're just not accommodating parking. I get the idea we don't want the parking, we want to reduce vehicles, et cetera, but that just is not happening at this point in time. You know, I could see reducing it by maybe 50%, but this is like 75% or more. It's huge, and so I won't support this on that basis unless someone can give me some really good excuse for doing this.
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you. Your Worship, I guess where I would start is probably on the residential. And I know Council may recall this project because it did go through the rezoning process earlier this year and received approval, and also had a housing agreement registered on the title of the land, which limits the use of the property to student housing. So part of why such a large variance appears before you this evening is because there's nothing in our current bylaw that speaks to student parking housing rates. The only residential rates we have are the 1.66 per dwelling unit. So we went through this process with the support of a traffic study, and we have some history with the property immediately next door, which has a student housing project, and we used a very similar ratio there. So at the end of the day, we found that our support for this variance is based on two things. It's our experience with that first project, which I would say was very much a case study, and the second is supported by the traffic study submitted with the report.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I think, I drive by that property, the first one that they built, and there isn't a lot of parking that is used by the students. These units are higher end. They're conveniently located right next to the VIU, so these students don't need parking. So I don't actually have a problem with this. I've looked at the unit that they've built. It's seldom ever full with that amount of units that they have, so I will support this.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
How many units is in the one next door?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. I'd have to get back to Council on that.
Is it even close to 44 or 56 or whatever, you know? Yeah, this is, I think this is twice the size of the other one, is it not? If not more. So comparing apples to oranges.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Obviously support the housing and obviously support the commerce that will come as a result of, and the commercial component that will have a coffee shop or whatever. But I don't think that we can dismiss the parking concerns and issues that are and have been for a long time. and we've received countless complaints from residents and otherwise for many years. I don't know how this will diminish the parking concerns or issues. And then when the 3rd Street project ever gets going, that's going to create more, of course, volume and traffic. But 56 down to 9 is a pretty significant number, and 44 heads in beds is what the report suggests. And it's kind of hard. I mean, I'd like to think in a previous iteration of in the development permit there was a contribution to a co-op vehicle that would, for the residents of that unit, that would at least make one, like myself, that doesn't quite get the 1 in 8 or 9 people that are going to live there, even if they're a student, only to have a car. So 9 times 6.5 or whatever it is. Just even though the school's right across the street, because they still have other, whatever, they still have other things that they're going to do, and or guests coming over, or whatever the case might be. So do we have an opportunity to request, and we have small car parking things that we've done, I don't see that in here. So, and bike units that must be created, bike storage locations and all of those things. And I don't know if that comes later, if that comes now. Can we ask that the developer get involved with the car share program by contributing a certain amount of money to it? Or is there a way to convince me that the 44 people in there are only going to have 8 cars, because I'm going to assume that the manager of the property, because it demands that there be a manager of the property, I'm going to assume the manager of the property is going to take up 1 spot, so now we're down to 8.
Your Worship, in response to Councillor Beswick's question, I can confirm that there is bicycle parking included within the project, but there was no proposal from the applicant to participate in a car share program similar to other developments in the community.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Not that long ago, we had Dr. Nielsen make a presentation to us about I think it was our strategic plan. And one of the things that he asked us to consider when we're thinking about how the university and the city work together was he asked us to recognize that how many students come from out of town, out of province, and students who are international students, and how much they need housing, and how we need to assist with that kind of housing, develop policies that work for the universities, that work for the students, to make sure that they are going to be able to come to this university and study and add to our economy. And the numbers that he had were astounding at the kind of money that the students bring into this town. So one of the first things that he pointed out to us was pitting parking against housing. He thought it was a wrong-headed approach. He thought that we should really be making every effort to assist with developing housing for students, whether that be homestays, whether that be suites and secondary suites, or whether that be this kind of housing. And we've had presentations from the International Students Department there telling us how scarce housing is for families and for international students in particular. This fits all of the criteria that we're looking for in the neighborhood plan and in our own community plan. It's right across the street from VIU. It's right across the street from where they will be studying and spending their time. It's on a transit route. In fact, there's the express up to the university. There's walking to shopping and other amenities in the area. There's pay parking across the street, which is evidently fine for everywhere else, and it's fine for here. If in fact they have friends coming over and there's no parking on the street, then there's pay parking across the street. So I just think that we need to step into the new way of doing things and seeing things, and the insistence that parking takes precedence over housing, I think, is a mistake for our city. And I think that we need to adjust our thinking in that way. And I'm sure that I'll be told that the neighborhood needs a break from this, and the pay parking across the street is there. The transit is there, and we should be looking at ways to encourage the use of things like that rather than punish a developer who is putting together housing that is a higher end type of housing and would be attractive for students. So I fully support this, and I think it will go a long way to changing the face of this community if we start to value housing over parking.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick. Councillor Fuller.
Don't get me wrong, I fully support student housing. Totally, fully. I also fully support secondary suites. Totally, fully. But what I don't support is the way we cherry pick what we're going to support it for. Parking is parking. This is a huge decrease. Sure, there's parking across the street. Yeah, they can use pay parking, but will they? No, they'll park on the street just like everybody else does. Why would they use pay parking? You know, you're talking, this isn't about the students. The housing is great, but having enough parking or even half enough parking would be far better. If we're going to reduce it to, what's the reduction to? I've already forgotten. 9 from 56, why don't we just say, the heck with the parking altogether? You know, let's put up instead of the parking, wait a minute, let's put in a community garden. Because we all support community gardens as well. And that'd give them free food too. But then, of course, they might not go to the coffee shop because they'll be getting their free food. So, you know, we can, if we say no parking is okay for here, then we need to be saying the same thing up in the hospital area. Because students live up in the hospital area too. So if I want to put up some student housing in the hospital area, are you going to say, yeah, you don't have to put any parking in there too, either? No, you won't. So I support students. I support quality housing for students. I've seen some very nice vehicles driven by students. And I'm not going to support this based on that amount of parking. If it was half, maybe, but this is just ludicrous to me.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. I will be supporting this motion, and I want to thank staff for the comments that they made. I do believe the rationale is sound, and I also believe that students who are looking not to be driving will be very attracted to these particular housing units, and I can't wait for them to be built. This is a wonderful project.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we're all very sensitive to parking issues, and certainly these numbers jumped out at me when I read the recommendation. But I do accept the rationale provided by Mr. Lindsay, and seen as these are immediately across the street from the university, I really don't see students living in these units wanting or needing a car to drive one block and try to find parking on the VIU campus. I don't see that happening. So in this particular case, I can accept the amendment and I will support this.
Thank you. I will also support this, and based on the fact that I've had long discussions with the operator of the unit next door. That's been a real tough project for them. Him and his wife have had to have a very hands-on relationship with that building, and part of the problem is the fact that we don't have a full school term here. If it was operating 12 months a year, if the university was going 12 months a year, that the dynamics and the viability of that building next door would be very different. So I can see very carefully that they've looked at it very carefully with respect to balancing out the number of units, a little bit of commercial space. They learned from the place next door what works and what doesn't work, and for us to require more parking after it's been very, very carefully looked at, I think we're just going to significantly add to the cost and potentially reduce the viability of the project. So I'll be voting in favor. So there is a motion on the floor, and I'm going to call a question. All those in favor, opposed, show Councillor Fuller is opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Good discussion. Next one is 9D, bylaw contravention notice. Marijuana grow operation and construction started without a building permit at 2120 Boxwood Road. Is there it's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the bylaw contravention notice for 2120 Boxwood Road. For the second time and for the third and final time. Seeing none, there is a staff recommendation on page 67 that council direct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 57 of the Community Charter for the property located at 2120 Boxwood Road. Is there a mover and a seconder, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So clear down to 9F, bylaw contravention notice. Construction completed without a building permit at 3076 Rock City Road. And the purpose is to obtain council authorization to proceed with the registration of a bylaw contravention notice on the property title at 3076 Rock City Road. Is there anyone wishing to speak to 3076 Rock City Road? For the second time? 3076 Rock City Road, and for the third and final time. Seeing none, there's a recommendation on page 71. Is there a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Brennan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hong, thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Remedial action order at 645 Selby Street to obtain council authorization to pursue remedial action to upgrade the decks on the condominium building located at 645 Selby Street. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to 645 Selby Street. Please.
Good evening. My name is Martin McGew. I live at 561 Hannah Road, and I own one unit in that building. And I've just been asked by Tony Bajan, he's one of the brothers that own the majority of the units in that building, to speak on behalf of the building and just to let council know that they have got a structural engineer coming, and they will be forwarding a report as well as intention to mitigate as determined, and therefore asking that Section 72, 73 not be implemented, and until such time, balconies will not be used in the building.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fuller for the delegation.
Yep. My understanding is the structural engineer is supposed to be coming on the 19th of December, I believe.
Yeah, I don't have the timeline on that, but something like that. A structural engineer has been.
I got an email from someone that said around the 19th. And do you recall the name of the engineer?
I don't have it, sorry.
Okay.
I can get it for you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Sean Harold. I've got the information here.
Yeah, okay.
Harold Engineering. And he was unable to actually do it prior to now because he's been so busy.
Yeah,
So
that
he
was my
is coming
understanding
in
too,
to do
that
this.
that the engineer was too busy to look at it until this time. yes.
So he's definitely going to be coming in before the end of this year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mentions Trilogy Structural. Can staff give me?
I don't see, do you want to speak to?
No, yeah, it mentions here some background. Trilogy Structural Engineers contacted the staff. Do you know anything about them or?
Not really, no.
Your Worship, I can speak to that comment in the report. So staff first identified our concerns with this property back late summer. Initially, we were contacted by a structural engineer who indicated that they were going to proceed on behalf of the property owners and do the investigation. They later contacted us about the middle of October and said that they were no longer involved in the project. So I assume that's a separate structural engineer. And then we're talking about the new engineers that sound like they're now may be involved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation? Councillor Hong.
Thank you. How is the strata going to ensure that nobody uses those decks?
I'm not sure, other than, like, I don't know how they would ensure that somebody doesn't go against what the strata has asked everybody to do. People can possibly go around what they've been asked to do, of course, just like in any situation. But people have been asked, like I've contacted my tenant and asked her not to use the deck, and she contacted me back and said, yeah, that's fine. And I would assume that the other landowners have done the same thing.
Thank you. No more questions for you, sir. I got some for staff later, though.
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, it's for staff. Thank you.
Move the staff recommendation. Okay. Is there a
Oh,
second?
no, I have a question
Oh,
for staff. But
okay.
I will
No
move the staff recommendation.
No further for the delegation, though. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Motion to receive the delegation. Before we move on, if we can ask, just a second here. Motion to receive, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to 645 Selby Street? Anyone else? 645 Selby? And for the third and final time, anyone else for 645 Selby? Thank you. So, Councillor Brennan, pardon me.
I would just like to ask staff, Mr. Lindsay, is this a situation where all of the units are rented? Do we know? I should have asked the delegation.
All I can say, Your Worship, is I know that the building is stratified. The composition of the units, I'm not able to provide you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think there are a couple units, 2 or 3 units that are owner occupied, and the rest of the units are rented.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Brennan, were you going to move the motion?
Yes.
Staff recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll move that.
Is there a seconder? Moved by Councillor Brennan and seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a letter that I believe was sent to staff from Hancon Holdings, Hans Heringa, and it does mention in here it's anticipated Sean Harold, PE Engineering, will be involved and retained ASAP by the owners of the strata plan by December 19th at the latest, and that he'll be visiting Tom Weinrich and or Darcy Fox ASAP before Christmas or in the new year as a scheduled permit. And it also mentions that he did not even know about this until last week, I believe it was, on the 30th is when he actually found out. Yeah, November 30th is when he wrote the letter, and he says he's just hearing about it that day, and that he wouldn't even be able to get access to the building inspection report that was done until tomorrow, I believe it is. Or no, the 2nd of December. So it's a letter that was sent to staff. I actually got a copy of it from one of the owners. Yeah, it says, please, yeah, so, I mean, I don't know what happened with this, but apparently they do have an engineer coming. So anyway.
Mr. Lindsay.
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to comment on the dates of the letter. Staff followed our normal protocol, and we sent a letter when immediately after becoming aware of this. It was both mailed and hand-delivered to the Strata in late August. When I became more recently involved in this and had seen the lack of progress on this file, I asked staff to take the unusual step of also sending letters to each of the Strata owners. I was concerned about the safety, and I wanted to make sure that each resident was aware in case the Strata had not passed those comments on.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I have a big concern with this because we're dealing with the Strata here, which means that there are representatives on the Strata. There should be minutes, monthly meetings that should be held accountable according to Strata regulations. So when individual owners aren't told, like as Councillor Fuller had said, it worries me that Strata is not doing its job. And everybody on that Strata should be canned, and they should have an annual AGM and select new members of that Strata that do the work. This isn't one individual house. This is an entire building. So my concern is, how are we kept liable? You know, when we talk about affordable housing, this could be affordable housing, but it's the safety risks. This is where my key, and I want to address these kind of issues that are concerning to me. So my question to the staff is, what can we do to ensure that they don't use the decks? Or we're not held liable, I guess, is the main thing, if the deck comes down in the storm that we're supposed to get, or if we do, or anything like the snow.
I think the most important step that council can take to assist staff in having this remedied is to pass the motion. I'm happy to hear that there's a new engineer that's maybe involved, but we'd certainly appreciate moving forward with the motion so that we can give some assurances that it will be dealt with in a timely manner. As I said, we have taken the step of notifying each of the individual owners, and our intention with doing that is that they would then make their tenants aware of this potentially dangerous situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to repeat what Mr. Lindsay said, but that is of the utmost importance, is that the individuals who own the properties be advised. But it is the corporate body of the Strata that is responsible for this. But I think we have some obligation to ensure that the people who live in those buildings, not even just the owners of the individual units. So I'm hoping, I'm not going to wait any longer. I support this, particularly because it says there's a sense of urgency that this matter be dealt with before rain and snow becomes a factor. Well, hello, it's snowing today, so that is upon us right now. I'd like to see us at least, at a minimum, ask that there be. Is there any common areas in this building? Do you know?
I'm not certain, Your Worship. If there's...
Okay, then at a minimum, a letter be delivered to each individual tenant, just named to tenant, right? So that it goes in their envelopes to ask them to stay off, and outline to them that in our view it is dangerous. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this section 7273 simply requires them to get the engineer. And then once they have the report, we move into other actions with it. We don't just jump into remediation immediately if remediation is not needed. So it says here, it advises Strata Corporation that the remedial action will consist of a structural engineer completing an assessment of the decks. Should it be confirmed that they're deficient, subsequent action will consist of. So we don't even know yet. The pictures definitely look like something is wrong, But this would simply ensure that they get that structural engineer in, and then we would follow up on the engineer's report.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. If we get the engineer's report in and it does make recommendations, our hope is that at that point they would move immediately with the remediation. If, however, there was not immediate action, this motion, if passed, would give the city the ability to step in and take action, which, if we were doing it, would not likely include removal, but depending on the outcome of that report, may not result in repair. If the city was doing it, may simply be removal of any dangerous feature, including a potential deck.
Thanks. Makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Your Worship. What I wanted to say in support of Mr. Lindsay's report is as a council, as a city, we cannot unknow what we know now. And if anything were to happen there, we would be a potential respondent in a situation like this. So I've seen some of these elsewhere. Once you get to this spot, I know the owners will plead and promise to do something. I think this is the process that ensures that the city has done its due diligence at a minimum. And if they turn around and address the issues in an expeditious manner, that's all and good for everybody. But this step, I think we cannot avoid, knowing what we know at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. I just want to concur and agree with all the previous speakers, but also these units, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, Mr. Lindsay, I'm assuming the decks would also be the fire exits. Never mind, I get the weather that's about to hit us, but also in those units, I believe the decks would be the fire exits. So I see that as a concern as well. So I'm definitely supportive of expediting the urgency here as well, for that reason as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other speakers, and we do have a staff recommendation which has been moved and seconded, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Next, Remedial Action Order 135 Prideaux Street. Purpose to obtain council authorization to pursue remedial action to upgrade the concrete block wall and the foundation of the building located at 135 Prideaux Street. It is requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to 135 Prideaux Street. 135 Prideaux Street for a second time and a third time. 135 Prideaux Street. Seeing nobody coming forward, there is a staff recommendation.
I'll make that recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded Councillor Brennan. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item I, Hospital Area Plan, Terms of Reference. To inform Council about the upcoming Hospital Area Plan process and to provide the associated terms of reference for Council approval. Mr. Lindsay, was there any presentation or information regarding this?
I did not have any planned presentation, but certainly he will answer any questions Council may have.
Yes, I have Councillor Bestwick first.
Thank you. Question for staff on page 90, plan area context. It indicates that Island Health is currently completing a planning review for the spring of 2017. It suggests that once complete, the plan will be a decision-making tool that benefits the property owners, residents, businesses in the city through meaningful input into issues affecting future development within the area. And then, so that's the Island Health. So they're doing that to be completed by the spring of 2017. And we are being asked to undertake a process that I understand would, in reading this report, would kind of do the same thing, only from the city's perspective. So the Island Health is going to undertake a review, a plan and review to increase in Nanaimo Regional General Hospital level of service provision, which is expected to be completed in spring 2017, to address the same things that we're going to start sometime in 2017 that'll take 14 months to get us into February, March, or April of 2018. So and the following is a projected timeline to complete the various components of the planning process. So should we be engaging or engaged with the Island Health while they're doing their neighborhood, parking, impact, provisions, the benefits to the residents, the businesses, the neighbors, the traffic, the visitors to the hospital, all of those things, because that's what we're doing. And they're going to finish theirs in the spring of 2017. So we're going to do key stakeholder engagement. I assume so are they. That's going to take us 3 months. We're going to do preparation of plans, options, discussions with stakeholders. That's going to take another 3 months. We're going to do a draft plan. That's going to take us 2 months after we've done 9 months of initiation and planning with consultants. Isn't Island Health who runs the hospital? And it would be like, to me, like VIU is going to do a plan to figure out the impacts on their property and just off their property. So we should jump in with them, or vice versa. So we're going to do one. We're going to finish in April or March or whenever of 2018. They're going to do one. They're going to finish it in the spring. Is there anything that we can do together?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I think this is an example of VIU is a perfect example where they went through a master plan process a number of years ago, and that master plan process ultimately helped inform the Harewood plan when that came forward. So very much similar here. Of course, the hospital area, their planning process would involve their lands, and they're very much a key stakeholder in our area. But the area that we're talking about in terms of the hospital area plan is actually a much larger area. They are part of the area, but they are not the entire. They are not the entire area. So if you look at page 93 in your agenda, page 93 shows you the overall. Is there a way we can rotate that image? I'm not sure. Shows you the overall study area in red. One more time. Perfect, thank you. So that shows you the overall study area in red, and then the hospital area isn't identified, but it's just, most people understand it's that area generally on the northeast portion right there. Thank you. So again, they are a stakeholder. They'll participate in this process. There's certainly a number of issues generated from having such a major employer in the area, but our study area will be much more encompassing than their plan.
Just to follow up, please. On page 92, the steering committee is made up of HANA, and then the next paragraph talks about key stakeholders. And the key stakeholders in our consultants' planning process will be the Regional General Hospital, Island Health, the Regional District in Nanaimo, the School District 68, the Hospital Neighborhood Association, area medical practitioners and specialists, and the business community. So I assume that we're doing the same stuff with the same people, because I'm hoping that Island Health is consulting with all of these same people that we say that we're going to consult with over 14 months. So there just seems to me to be, and then public consultation, focus groups 2, community meetings 2, social media, open houses, public hearings. Well, I would hope that Island Health has come to us and said, hey, we're doing a hospital urban node planning process review based on our growth and development and the impact that it has in our surrounding neighborhood. We recognize that parking's been a challenge and all those other things, and it's only going to get worse if we don't make it better. So here we are, we're going to do one that's going to take us 14 months, and they're already doing it. In my head, in my mind, they're doing what this says that Island Health is already doing what we're going to do starting in 2017.
Mr. Chairman, I can't really speak to the extent of their process. My expectation is it would focus primarily on their lands, and you are right. There's absolutely a number of stakeholders which would participate in both processes. But again, I would anticipate that their process would be not an urban node plan, but very much a plan focused around their properties and their use, where ours would be a much larger plan looking at definitely the hospital as a major employer in the area, but looking at issues beyond simply just the hospital.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Well, a lot of the questions were answered, and about the public consultation process that's on page 92. Would that be concurrent with your phase 2 of the, it says all phase 2 for focus groups, community, and online? Would they be involved in some of the stakeholder meetings?
Sorry, through your worship to Councillor Kipp, is your question whether the health authority would be involved in those?
Well, yeah, no, let's say Nanaimo Regional Hospital, Island Health, and that community, the key stakeholders you've got. Then you've got some referrals to Minister of Transport, VIU, BC Ferries, First Nations, RCMP. I guess those are typical referrals, but the public consultation on page 92 below the key stakeholders, the focus groups, community meetings and that, would they be involved also in some of the key stakeholder meetings, or you would just do individual key stakeholder meetings?
No, they would absolutely be involved, yes.
Involved, okay. On the other side, how many people are involved in the Hospital Area Neighborhood Association? Do we know how big of a membership they have?
I would hazard a guess it's around 50.
Perfect, that's good. They need to circulate too. Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers. There's a staff recommendation on page 87. Is there someone prepared to move the staff recommendation? Councillor Brennan, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fuller? Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Bestwick opposed. Motion carries. So the next item is notice of motion, and I apologize to the clerk. I made 2 copies and left them on my desk. So I just wanted to say that I will be bringing forward a motion next week that would address, notwithstanding the fact that we have no bylaws with respect to citing of marijuana dispensaries, it will address a request for a motion that we not permit the citing of medical marijuana facilities, medical marijuana dispensaries within 500 meters of an area that is where children and youth congregate. No. Councillor Bestwick.
I don't disagree. I'm just wondering, what is the distance, if I may ask, and I know it's a notice of motion, but from a liquor store, what's that distance from a liquor store to a child's place of gathering, like a school? Is it greater than 500 meters?
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. There was a number of different distances. There was 1 kilometer from other stores, but I believe it was 250 meters from daycares. But I would have to check that for you. I'm sorry, I'm going from memory there.
The only reason that I ask that question is if ever the liquor control licensing branch or whatever, and then gets engaged in the marijuana distribution locations, whatever, if there's a tie-in to the 2 with regulations in terms of distances and things like that. So just a point of interest.
So just wanted to let council know that I will bring the motion forward next week, and I'll be speaking to the motion. Thank you. So the next item is under other business, and we have a delegation from Ms. Audrey Bouvet. Yes, ma'am. We can have your name and place of residence, please.
Audrey Bouvet, and I own 619 Georgia Avenue.
Is it past Kenny's bedtime?
It is past Kenny's bedtime, and he should be sleeping.
Thank you.
He did, however, ask where Mommy was going when she ran out the door. So I know some of you sitting here. I don't know all of you. My name is Audrey. Was born and raised in the city of Nanaimo, specifically the South End, which is why we chose to purchase there. Anyways, I'm here tonight. I was going to put together a really large presentation, and then I decided what we need is actually something really simple. City of Nanaimo does not have a cold weather youth shelter, period. In the city of Nanaimo, we have 8 beds for all of our homeless youth. And these are not barrier-free beds. There is hoops to jump to. In fact, if you saw me run out for a second, I actually had to call and ensure that somebody still had a bed for this evening because they're going to show up about 10 minutes late. So if you try to take a young woman to the Samaritan House, you can't take her. If you try to take a young man to the Salvation Army, you can't take them. If you try to take a young woman or a young man to the cold weather shelter, you can't take them. I understand why adults and youth are not housed together whom are homeless. That makes sense for me. However, we got a huge missing link here, and you don't have a lot of time. It is snowing. It's actually really snowing outside right now. Your youth are sleeping at Georgia Avenue School. They're sleeping in the park behind John Barsby School. They're sleeping at the park where the hut is on the corner of Wallace, where the Tim Hortons is, where I guess people thought if they cleared out the bush, they could clear out some of the riffraff that was there. Well, some of the riffraff was your homeless youth, your homeless 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that have nowhere else to go but access shelter there. So we're doing great for adults. I'm asking that you guys act fast. We got a lot of buildings in the city of Nanaimo. Figure out what we need to put in there for insurance, for liability, before you end up with a story about a 16-year-old homeless youth that died because they were cold, because they got pneumonia, because they got bronchitis, because the hospital turned them away because they didn't have the right paperwork or a social worker in place. And this is happening every day. So I'm not sure what has to happen, but I do know that you have buildings. I do know that you have people that you can hire, CYC, ECE, social workers, social work students from up at VIU, someone to come in to properly staff and give the kids a dry place to sleep and maybe some hot chocolate. Any questions?
You. Questions for the delegation? Councillor Fuller.
Do you know if the Unitarian shelter takes youth?
Sorry?
The Unitarian cold weather. Do you know if they take
No,
youth?
I called last week. And no, they did try to help us. Okay. We've even tried Haven.
Yeah, no, I know. When I ran Samaritan House prior to the New Hope shelter being built, it was male, female, and I would take youth in, regardless. You know, if a 12 or 13-year-old is dropped off at a shelter, are you going to send them out on the street? And so I would contact the social worker on call, and when they would refuse to allow it and not have anywhere for that kid to go, I would do it anyway. And then I would contact MCFD the next day, and oddly enough, they would approve that youth to stay there until they found a place, which would take maybe 2 or 3 days. I know there is a severe lack around youth and youth housing, youth homelessness, so that's definitely a good idea. I don't know how we would go about doing it this year. Yes, there are lots of empty buildings, but it's not just about empty buildings.
No, I get that it's bigger than that, but I think we do need to look at something for this year because they're not doing that anymore, Gord. They're not accepting the youth at Samaritan. I've been there, knocking on the door.
I know. It's a women's shelter only, so there's more barriers actually in place than there were back in the early 2000s. There's far more barriers, especially with the New Hope and Samaritan House. There's way more
And
barriers.
after hours, MCFD doesn't want the phone call.
No.
We don't have an open file on this youth. Sorry, we cannot help you,
Yeah.
is what I'm told.
And yet you're obligated by law to report that. Obligated. People are obligated by law. If you are walking by Georgia Avenue, you see a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old out there, you are obligated by law to report there may be abuse or neglect of that youth happening. So what do you do?
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you for the effort. Do you have any idea how many kids are out there now in that age category that you've seen in that area?
I can tell you tonight there'll be 10.
About 10 kids. And that's like a typical thing. A lot of them are either out of, or some are even aged out if they're a little older out of. I think a girl passed away in Vancouver the other day at 19 years old, aged out. Most of the kids you see that you've seen are from the Harewood area. They were moved in and they've been going kind of from back and forth to town. They were like down here at the, like what you said, by the old scout hut and that.
That's correct.
They moved kids out of there. So you're figuring about 10 bed need currently?
Correct.
Do the kids ever go, are the kids allowed to go to Tillicum House? To the safe
So
house
they
there?
are, and Tillicum House has 8 beds. It's not always funded to have all 8 beds operational, and it's not barrier-free.
Not
So
barrier-free, too.
Yeah,
That's right, so
that's part of the bigger issue.
thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you, Audrey, for bringing this forward. The question I was going to say, a comment I want to make quickly is I do believe that where we can look at, so you stated the one on town site does not accept youth.
That's correct.
Is there a reason, have you done, this isn't fair they're not here, so I'm not knocking them. I value the work and support the work they do, support the funding, the city grants to them, but have you found a reason why? Is it because of legalities, because of having youth and adults? Is that?
It's youth and adults together. That's correct.
So what would the rulings be? Like, I know you know lots about licensing and whatnot. Would it take a youth worker to be a staffer to be there, to be permissible? What would it take to be permissible? Because we fund that, and if we could be creative, I'd like to look at that where we can help more in that area, especially the facilities that we fund already. What would that look like to make it permissible?
So the small amount of research that I've done, and I'm happy to do more, is that they need to have different amenities available to them. So in essence, you could almost have them in the same building, but they can't be together. They can't be in the same rooms together. They need separate washrooms. And yes, it's a staffing ratio for staff to kids. And if I'm not mistaken, it's 2 to 8. But I'd have to do more research on that.
So it's doable.
It is, and other communities are doing it. I don't have my examples this evening, and I apologize, but other communities are successfully taking on this initiative, and not just for cold weather, which is what I'm talking to you guys about tonight, because it's imminent and happening, but they have them barrier-free in other communities, and they're working.
So I believe, so the model's there, there's models there. I think it'd be criminal for anyone to suggest, no one here is suggesting that one would have to open up a child protection file to get a child housed for the night. So that's definitely the backwards way we cannot go. And if I can be a support in this matter, I look forward to the conversation. But you're right, time is now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
Audrey, thank you so much for coming tonight. This is something that I certainly wasn't aware of. So you're saying that Tillicum has 8 beds that are available tonight, but that there's more than 8 kids, that there's 10 more?
Yeah, so Tillicum has 8 beds. They're not always, they can't always open up all 8 beds pending on funding.
Mm-hmm.
And I know an additional 10 this evening
that are
would
out
be
there, that are
homeless
out there.
and looking for places to couch surf and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Audrey, thank you. This is obviously an important issue, and we need to take some steps, I think, here in Nanaimo to deal with this. Have you talked to our social planner, John Horn? Have you talked to him about what possibilities he might be able to access with the Unitarian, sort of cold, wet?
I haven't spoken with him yet, but I was given his contact information.
Okay, because John is our sort of lead on that, and was sort of the lead to get the emergency shelter set up.
Mm-hmm.
So we could do things tonight like ask for a report or refer this to. But I really think that it's a little more urgent than asking for a report. So I would ask, this is Mr. Lindsay's department, I think, if we couldn't set something up with our social planner and Audrey and whomever is important to have at that table, and see if we can't have a quicker response than we might get from having a report. Would you be willing to?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Fuller, if I could, I wonder if we can go one step further than that, because I saw your post of showing the tent of the 19-year-old in Surrey that died,
Yeah.
right, recently. I wonder if, would you be willing to work with Mr. Horn and a champion from councillors, or somebody on council that would work with Mr. Horn and Ms. Bouvet between now and next week, our next meeting, and report back to us next meeting. So if we could, I know it's going to take some time, but if we could, I would really like to see, if you could bring something like that forward, Councillor Fuller, that would be great. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a lot more complicated than it sounds, because any worker with youth is going to need an intensive criminal record check. So you can't just take adult workers that work with the homeless and bring them into youth work. So yeah, I'd definitely be interested in getting together with you. Yeah, I work with adult homeless, but I have also worked with youth in the past. So yeah.
Thank you. So a motion would be required that Ms. Bouvet, Councillor Fuller, and Mr. Horn develop or determine over the next 7 days what they can do to address this situation immediately, on an emergency basis, if you will.
Your Worship, I would be interested in working on that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so are we capturing that essence of a motion?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Motion to receive the delegation? Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make.
Please come closer to the mic.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was wondering, you said that there's like a lot of open buildings that aren't.
Buildings are there.
Yeah, but like.
Just open a building and say, okay, let's just use this for an emergency shelter. You would have to
Yeah, but-
set it up properly.
From experience, because a couple weeks ago, having to see Audrey's face leaving me at Tim Hortons at night was heartbreaking, and because the safe house was full, and cold weather shelter would not let me in. Buildings, like even with just like a pillow and a blanket on the floor, would be way warmer than sleeping outside, from like experience, and I think even that would just be better. Like,
But the problem is there's liability issues. I was out on the street at 14. I knew every apartment in New Brunswick, in the town I lived in, that had access into them that didn't have security doors, so I could stay warm at night in the middle of 20 below weather. So I know what you mean, and I've had to do that. I used abandoned buildings as well, but that was my choice to do so. And if you're looking at the city allocating a building, I'm sure we might be able to come up with something relatively quickly, but we'll have to take a look at that. We'll have to discuss it with the city staff.
Thank you very much. Motion to receive the delegation.
Definitely hear you.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Brennan and seconded by Councillor Hong. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Bouvet, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Fuller, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for helping.
Thank you. So, next item is question period. Agenda items only. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe, or Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.